today's mindful moment. We hear all the time, right, that to make it through something truly awful, you need incredible strength. Like, you got to be a lone wolf, someone who beats the odds on their own. But I'm not sure it's that simple. What if the real source of strength, the thing that gets you through the worst imaginable, what if it's the connections we have with each other?
Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, let's dive into that today.
Oh, it's good.
And we can explore this through the lives of three sisters, Sibi, Magda, and Livy Meller.
Okay.
Their story takes us through the Holocaust, from Slovakia to Auschwitz and even beyond. So we're not just going to recount what happened. We're going to try and understand how they did it, how they survived, what choices they made. And we'll be using a variety of sources to really get the full picture. So it's not just like a history lesson.
Right, right.
It's about resilience, too, human resilience against unbelievable odds.
Yeah, absolutely. The power of the human spirit, and especially, like you said, in the context of their connection as sisters. I think one of the things that really pulls you into their story is how we're given this window into their life, even before the Holocaust. The very beginning takes us to their childhood home, June 1929, Vranov Nada Toplu. And we see this scene with their father by the oleander bush. It's peaceful, but, you know, even then, you can sense the beginnings of their relationship.
You can feel it building, yeah.
The foundation, yeah. Sibi, who's 7 at the time, she's already showing that she's protective of her younger sister, Livy. She's only 3.
The world's changing around them, right?
Exactly. We start learning about the pressures building outside the family. Things like the Hashara program. This was a movement that prepared young Jewish people for life in Palestine, you know, like agricultural life.
Right, right.
And Sibi was part of this, and it shows us, you know, how things were getting tense, right?
Yeah, people were looking for somewhere safe.
A haven, yes. Because Europe was becoming a more and more dangerous place for Jewish families.
Yeah, and that brings us to 42, right?
Yeah.
March 1942.
Yeah, March 1942. And the danger is no longer this distant thing. It arrives right at their door.
Oh, yeah.
The Hlinka Guard, they come demanding 15-year-old Livy. And the source material really emphasizes how much this distresses their mother, Chaya. It really underlines the injustice of what's happening, that a child is targeted just because of who she is.
It's so heartbreaking.
It is. It's awful. And this is when Sibi comes home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And there's this beautiful description of the family holding each other tight. You know, imagine that. Facing possibly never seeing each other again.
Right.
And all they want is to hold each other. And we also find out Magda's in the hospital at this time.
Adding to the worry.
Another layer of it, exactly. And Sibi, she makes this huge decision. She decides to go with Livy.
Wow.
And she reminds Livy of this promise they made to their father, to always stick together.
Right, right.
Think about what that meant for their parents, for Yitzchak and Chaya. And Livy even asks, was I told to go?
Oh, man. Such a tough question.
And even in all this chaos, Yitzchak, he puts food on the bed for their journey.
That's powerful. Even in crisis, he's thinking of them.
Providing.
Yeah.
And all this while, Magda, remember, she's in the hospital, totally unaware. She makes her own promise to her sisters, but she's completely isolated.
It's like they're living two separate stories at the same time.
Parallel, but connected, you know?
Yeah, it's intense.
Then March 1942, their departure. The sources really paint a picture of this chaotic and terrifying scene, all these young girls being forced together to be transported. But Sibi, even in the middle of this, she comforts another girl who's really distressed. Her name's Ruth.
That's incredible.
Isn't it? It really shows how strong her empathy is, even when she's facing her own terrible situation.
Yeah. And someone calls out to Ruth, too, right? Like, there's still some connection there, even in all this fear.
Exactly. It's a glimmer of humanity. And then on the train, in that cramped and uncertain space, Sibi wakes Livy up and gives her a piece of their mother's Shabbat cake. It was wrapped in that familiar tea towel.
Wow. That cake must have felt like a piece of home, a reminder of their mother's love.
A tangible link to their past.
Yeah, yeah.
And it makes you think, what truly matters in moments like that?
Little things become so important.
Absolutely. And then they arrive at Poprad Station, April 1942, and the Hlinka guards are there, and they're brutal. They use whips, just casual violence.
That's sickening.
It's horrific. And Livy, she's scared. She asks what she did wrong.
Oh, man.
It really highlights how senseless this persecution was. And Sibi, even though she must be terrified herself, she reassures Livy she's protecting her as best she can.
In Auschwitz.
Auschwitz.
Just the name, it's heavy.
It is. The SS uniforms.
Yeah.
Barking dogs. Violence is immediate. Girls are being bitten. It's all designed to break them, to take away their humanity.
To make them feel powerless.
Exactly. Control through terror. But there's this element of deception, too.
Right.
The way the camp is presented initially, there's this tree-lined street, neat gardens. It's like a facade hiding the horrors that lie behind it.
A carefully constructed illusion to trick them.
To lull them into a false sense of security. And then the word prisoners, that's when the reality hits. They find a lumpy mattress in this dark, crowded barrack. Their old lives are over.
And a new, terrifying one begins.
Right. And it's here that we see Livy holding this coin her mother sewed into her vest. She doesn't even realize she's holding on to it.
A little piece of home. A secret treasure.
And it's a powerful symbol, isn't it? Of faith, of family, carried into the darkest place imaginable. And what do you think that coin might have represented for her in that moment?
A connection to her mother. A reminder of her faith. Maybe even a source of hope.
Perhaps all of those things. Meanwhile, back home, Yitzchak is told that Magda's healthy and well. And the doctor has this fake smile. It foreshadows the lies and the deceit that permeated this whole era.
And he has to decide when, or even if, to tell Magda the truth about Sibby and Livy.
An impossible choice, forced upon them by circumstance. It speaks to the broader context, you know.
The fear, the misinformation, families torn apart.
Exactly. And the first days in Auschwitz are full of these shocks to the system. Lydia sees her shaved head in a mirror, and it devastates her. This deeply personal violation.
It's like losing a part of yourself.
Your identity stripped away. And Sibi, she doesn't say anything at first. She's probably just overwhelmed.
Yeah, I can't imagine how she must have felt.
And then there's Sibi's job, counting prisoners. Sounds small, right?
Right.
But it meant constant interaction with the capo and the SS, which terrified Livy.
Of course.
Then they're separated when Livy's sent to the hospital. They're so vulnerable on their own.
The sources describe the soup rations, too. It's horrifying. They're given watery broth with random objects in it, inedible things.
Absolutely awful. Yet somehow they find a moment to laugh together.
A spark of humanity.
Refusing to let the horror extinguish their spirit.
It's amazing that they could find humor in that situation.
What do you think that shared laughter tells us about their ability to cope, to be resilient?
That even in the darkest of places, they could still find a connection. And that connection, that humor, it helped them survive. It's like a small act of defiance.
Absolutely. And then there's this act of kindness from Sibi. She saves a piece of meat from her soup. And she shares it with Livy in the hospital, this secret feast. It shows how powerful their bond was, stronger than even their hunger.
Right. And then we meet two Kavos, Rita and Ingrid.
And this is where we see a glimmer of hope. Ingrid asks Rita to watch out for Sibi and Livy. And because of that, they get assigned to the sorting room, Canada.
That was a good thing, right?
A much better position. And it shows how even in that system, human connection, kindness could make a difference, even if it was risky.
It's a reminder that there were good people, even in the worst of places.
Then something seemingly small happens. Livy loses her shoe.
Oh, no.
But it's more than just a lost shoe. It's symbolic.
In what way?
Well, Sibi, she's determined to get those shoes, which are too small, onto Livy's feet.
A small...
But it becomes this moment of desperation, like a silent prayer for help. It really brings their struggle to life, you know? Makes it real for us.
Yeah, it's those little details that make their story so powerful.
Absolutely. And then we see their reactions to prayer. It's different for each of them.
Right. Some find comfort, some don't.
It shows how individuals cope with trauma and loss, the internal battle alongside the external, holding on to faith or trying to find meaning in suffering.
It's interesting to think about how resilience is portrayed in other stories, too, like in those AI audiobook analyses on YouTube.
Oh, you mean channels like Mindful Moments?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They often talk about how characters face adversity in different ways, and the way these sisters found strength in their connection. I think that's a perfect example of that.
I see what you mean. Their bond becomes their anchor in the storm.
Exactly.
And we can't forget Magda. Back in Vranov, she's hiding with Mrs. Track. She's eventually captured and sent to a prison in Banska Bystrica. It reminds us that this wasn't just happening in the camps.
The Nazi terror was everywhere.
Inescapable. And for Sibi and Livy, they face another selection. Livy questions Sibi's choice to have her inspected first. It shows the agonizing decisions they had to make, constantly weighing survival.
Always calculating.
Right. Then we meet SS officer Grease. And the idea that having a lower 4-digit number could be an advantage.
Life and death hinging on the most arbitrary thing.
Exactly. Then Sibi's feet, they're in terrible condition.
Oh, no.
But there's this unexpected kindness from a man named Armbruster. He brings her warm water, ointment, clean socks, even tea.
Wow.
It shows that even within this system, humanity could still exist. Even small acts of compassion could make a huge difference.
Yeah, must have felt like a miracle.
A respite, for sure. And then there's this moment with an onion.
An onion.
Sibby gives it to Livy secretly. She remembers their grandfather saying onions had medicinal properties.
It's like a connection to their past, to their family.
Keeping those traditions alive, finding comfort in them. And there's this flashback to a linden tree, too. It symbolizes the importance of nature, of family traditions. It grounds them, connects them to a time before the horror.
And it's not a one-way street, right? Livy takes care of Sibby, too.
Right. When Sibby's sick, Livy gives her garlic, following Rita's instructions, sharing knowledge, looking out for each other.
Essential for survival.
Absolutely. But then Livy becomes a courier for the SS.
Oh, wow. That's dangerous.
Incredibly. But it might also give her a little freedom, access to information. Back in Vranov, Magda's publicly humiliated. And it causes Chaya and Yitzhak huge worry.
Anti-Semitism was so widespread.
Pervasive.
Yeah.
And the threat constant. Then Sibby finds something, a baby's bonnet.
Oh.
It's a powerful symbol, don't you think?
Of lost innocence.
And maybe a reminder of what they were fighting for. A future that included children.
A future worth surviving for. And then Sibby meets an SS officer she recognizes from the demolition site.
Unexpected.
He offers her a less difficult job at the Birkenau post office.
She initially refuses.
Oh, wow.
But she later reconsiders. These were impossible choices.
Absolutely.
And Livy, she sees something horrifying. Naked women in a truck.
Oh, God.
A glimpse into the fate that awaited so many. A stark reminder of the danger they were in.
The brutality.
Yeah. Then there's a group of new inmates that arrive. One of them is a woman named Vanushka, and she tells stories. It highlights this human need for connection and escape, even in the darkest of times.
Stories can be a powerful way to cope.
A refuge, a way to transcend the reality of the situation. And then another unexpected interaction. An SS guard asks Sibby to collect parcels. These little moments where the usual dehumanization is broken. And then Livy worries about Sibby, and she has this terrifying encounter with SS officer Mandel.
Wasn't he known as the Beast?
That's right, riding his black horse. It's a constant reminder of the danger, of the arbitrary nature of it all.
And then Livy's punished, put in the hole.
Rita explains what happened, but Sibby can't do anything to help.
Powerless. Back in Vradov, Magda and her family are struggling even more. They have to sell their belongings for food.
It reflects the widespread suffering of so many Jewish families. And Magda, she hides valuables in a trapdoor.
Like Mrs. Track did before.
Resourcefulness.
No.
Trying to protect what little they had left. And then there's this moment with a sword lily. Magda finds it in the forest with her grandfather. It's a symbol of strength, resilience, hope.
A glimmer of beauty in the darkness.
Exactly. Back in the camp, Sibby stands up to a man named Heinz about some paper.
Small acts of resistance.
Exactly, refusing to be completely controlled. And she has this unusual encounter with Eric, an SS officer from Canada who remembers her.
Human interaction in the most inhumane place.
It's complex, contradictory. Then Sibby meets a little girl, Irinka. It sparks her concern for the other children in the hospital. She brings it up to Volkenrath, who dismisses it.
The Nazi regime's disregard for human life, especially children, was horrifying.
Absolutely. But then there's this moment with Volkenrath. She's distressed, and Sibby offers her comfort.
It's hard to imagine.
A crack in the facade,
Right.
a brief moment of shared human emotion.
The war ends, and the sisters begin this long journey back to Vranov. They see the devastation. They meet familiar faces at the station.
The beginning of a long road to recovery. And Susanna returns from staying with non-Jewish relatives.
A reminder that there were so many different experiences of survival.
Then Magda's experience in the school in Novaky and her subsequent confinement. It shows that even as the war was ending, the persecution continued in some places.
It didn't just stop overnight.
And Magda's transported back to the train station. She thinks about what Sibby and Livy have been through, the suffering they've endured.
The impact of their shared trauma.
Then Magda has this dream about resistance, and she tries to escape from the transport.
Wow.
She's caught, of course, but it shows her spirit, her refusal to be passive. Then she's taken to another prison and endures this awful journey in cattle wagons.
So many people suffered, even after the camps were liberated.
Absolutely. And Sibby and Livy discuss escaping Birkenau. Livy's very dependent on Sibby.
Understandably so.
Then Sibby has a dream about their mother. She still holds on to hope.
Hope is so important.
It's what keeps you going. And in the camp, Livy celebrates Sibby's birthday, trying to find little joys amidst the horror.
Maintaining a sense of normalcy. Then someone named Leah tells Sibby she saw Magda.
A mix of hope and fear, the constant uncertainty. And Sibby, she goes to desperate lengths to find Magda in the family camp.
Using a parcel as an excuse.
The block leader resists at first. It was dangerous, but they reunite.
What a moment.
Emotional. Magda's shocked by Sibby's appearance, how much she's changed. They find an empty block, a moment of privacy to connect, to start processing what they've been through.
To share their burdens.
And then they learn the truth about their mother and grandfather. They're dead.
Oh, no.
Magda tells them about their last months in Vronov, her capture. They're facing the full weight of their loss.
That's heartbreaking.
Then, while they're in Birkenau, they see a transport arriving.
More prisoners.
And in the line, they see their mother.
Oh, my God.
They try to reach her, but they can't.
Such a cruel twist of fate. To see her, but not be able to reach her.
They go back to their block, facing the reality of their loss.
The killings stop. Then they reunite with Uncle Ivan, Aunt Helena, and their children.
A bittersweet reunion. Some family left, but so much loss.
And then they find out Aunt Helena died on a death march.
The danger continued even in those last days. And Sibby and Livy are moved back to Auschwitz, separated from Magda again.
The upheaval never seems to end.
Then the death march from Auschwitz begins. Sibby pushes them to keep moving, to survive. They arrive at Ravensbrück, and Sibby comforts a young girl there. Even after all she's been through, her compassion remains.
Incredible.
They find some abandoned supplies, share food. It's an act of defiance, a testament to the communal spirit that helped people survive. They're moved to Retzau. The march continues. Then they find refuge in an abandoned village, Miro.
A moment of peace.
And they bury a dead soldier with dignity, a reminder of their humanity. Then they encounter Russian soldiers.
It's over.
The war is over. They journey to Brandenburg, to an army base, saying goodbye to fellow survivors. Then they're in a displaced persons camp, waiting to be repatriated.
Starting to rebuild their lives.
It was a long and difficult process. They say a tearful goodbye to Eva.
The bonds formed in such difficult times.
Powerful. They return to Prague, but it's not the same. Strangers are in their home. It's a complicated homecoming.
Everything's changed.
But they reclaim their apartment, honor their mother's memory. It's a way of reclaiming their past. They reunite with Uncle Ivan and their cousins, sharing stories of their losses. They move into an apartment above their uncles, creating a new family unit.
Moving forward together.
Magda and Yitzchak start a relationship. They decide to move to Rehovot. Sibby's hesitant at first, but she eventually gives her blessing.
A new chapter.
Then the sisters reunite in Israel, the culmination of their long journey.
The promised land.
They start new lives there. Magda works for Mrs. Weitzman, Livy works there too, and meets Ziggy.
Building their futures.
And their bond remains strong. Their support for each other is unwavering. It was key to their survival. Livy marries Ziggy. Sibby has a son, Carol.
Their families grow.
A testament to their resilience, their ability to find joy after such darkness. And there's this glass sculpture dedicated to them, The Miracle of Three Sisters.
A beautiful tribute.
Magda writes in her diary about the end of the war, her thoughts and feelings, and the author acknowledges the inspiration for the story, Livia's connection to the tattooist of Auschwitz.
A reminder that this is a real story, real people.
Their lives intertwine, showing how love and strength can lead to survival, even in the face of unimaginable horror.
It's been a long journey with Sibby, Magda, and Livy. Think about how their promise to stay together shaped their actions and ultimately helped them survive. It shows how important human connection is when you're facing adversity. And, subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more stories like this. Share this episode with someone who appreciates tales of courage and resilience. And there's a link in the show notes if you want to read the book and learn more about their experiences. But most importantly, keep thinking critically about the lessons of history and the strength of the human spirit.